Hi, my name is Lacey, and I decided to research Atlantic puffins and learn more about them. So this is everything that I found out. So this is the Fratercula artica, and that is the scientific name of the Atlantic puffin. The Atlantic puffin, as you will see, has a very distinct look from most other birds. It has the coloration of a penguin, however, it kind of looks like a parrot, and this creates a really unique looking bird that you see here. So the Atlantic puffins are a part of a larger order of birds known as Charadriiformes. This order of birds is very large and has over 350 species. And these birds vary quite greatly in the environments that they live in, and also the way that they look and their flying capabilities. But some things that the birds do have in common in this order is that they are all medium, small sized, and that they eat small invertebrates and animals. Um, but more in close relation is the family that the Atlantic puffins belong to, and these are the Alcidae family, and they're known as auks. Auks include murres, guillemots, auklets, puffins, and merlets. Right here is a pigeon guillemot that I put in. This is a thick-billed murre, and then this is a really cool crescent auk, and it just shows you what a wide range this family looks like. But they do have quite a bit in common characteristic-wise. One thing is that they appear to be closely related to penguins due to similar coloration, and then also they're all great divers. However, they're not related that closely to penguins. Much of the similarities that you see are a byproduct of convergent evolution, and also auks can fly and penguins can't, which is important to note. But back on the topic of auk characteristics, they're excellent swimmers and divers, and then most of their diet comes from the water, so this comes in handy. Their diving abilities have come at a cost, however. They have these very short wings that are not great for flight. They can fly and they just do the bare minimum of flight, but they're better suited for diving. And then also they walk pretty clumsy, and if you ever see video of it, it's pretty stinking cute. Um, Another feature about auks is that they are monomorphic. Unlike other birds that have males that look different than females, auks look the exact same between the two sexes. For the Atlantic puffin in particular, the males are slightly larger, but that's really one of the only indicators. Um, and most auks spend the majority of their time in or by the water and come to shore for their breeding season. There are some exceptions to this within this family, but the Atlantic puffin is not one of the exceptions. Another thing about Atlantic puffins is that they're monogamous and they form these lifelong mates. And they're also philopatric, meaning that they nest at the same spot time and time again, year after year. And this characteristic is especially important when it's studying Atlantic puffins and their migratory patterns that I will talk about later in the presentation. So there are currently three types of puffins. And in particular, the horned puffin and the Atlantic puffin look quite similar. Um, by looking at them, you can tell that they're different based on one feature. The Atlantic puffin has this blue ring on its beak that you can see right here. And that is not the case for the horned puffin. But if you know where the bird's from, that's very helpful because of the puffins, the Atlantic puffin's the only one that is found in the Atlantic, and the other two are found in the Pacific. Um, and this means that the Atlantic puffins live in this super rich area between North America and Northern Europe. And you can find puffins at many different locations here, from the eastern side of Canada to a lot of Northern Europe, like the Scandinavian countries. And then, in particular, Iceland has 60% of the Atlantic puffin population. Um, but they spend most of their time mid-ocean, and then they come to shore for breeding season in the summer. And when they're in the water, they're found either at the Northern Sea or the Arctic Circle. And then I'll talk a little bit more about how they live in cliffs for breeding season. So another thing about the puffins is their diet. Previously, I established that Atlantic puffins are great divers, and this means that they are excellent at catching fish. and that's also why their diet is fish. They mostly hunt for smaller fish, but sometimes you'll see them catch bigger fish, and they'll bring this back to shore to eat. Um, and they need a lot of small fish to sustain their homostasis. Adult males need up to 40 small fish a day. This means that puffins are constantly diving, and they can also eat fish while submerged in the water. And they also have this really cool feature where they can carry multiple fish at once, and you don't see this in many other birds. But this allows them to carry multiple fish and then bring it back to the nest if they need to for their young. This is a really cool innovation that these birds have, and it is largely due to their beak. Their top part of their beak comes at a different angle than their lower part. And also, they have these peculiar edges on the side of their beak and this rough tongue that allows them to hold so many fish at once. And with consuming so many fish from salt water, these puffins have to get rid of high volumes of salt. And they do this by excreting salt from salt glands in the nostrils or from their kidneys. And also worth noting that sometimes fish aren't always available for puffins, so you can see them eat mollusk or crustacean. Like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, Atlantic puffins spend most of their year offshore in the middle of the Atlantic and come ashore for mating. When doing research for this video, I came across this experiment that was done on puffin migration. And researchers put geolocators on puffins and studied their migration patterns and found something very unique. Puffins travel varies in distance and direction, and most birds' migratory patterns depend on genetic and inherited information. However, this experiment that I found, it shows that there may be something else at work for puffin migration. It could be a sense of strong individuality or also a very strong navigational memory. Um, but Atlantic puffins are going to continue to be an important bird for the continual research of migratory patterns. When puffins are not at the oceans or sea, they're ashore breeding in the spring and summer. As I mentioned earlier, puffins return to the same spot every year with the same mate. These spots are often burrows in the ground or on natural edges and cliffs. And one mating ritual that I thought was really cool that they do is they do this thing called billing. And this is when it looks like kind of like kissing, and it's pretty cute where they rub their beaks against each other. Um, Also, each season, the they only lay one egg with their mate, and both parents share the responsibilities and incubate the egg. And let's say something happens to the egg during the season, the Atlantic puffin has been known to produce another one for that season. Also, puffins become fledglings after 6 weeks, um, and then they leave the nest around that time. Puffins are also one of the only birds that give their babies whole fish instead of regurgitated fish. And then after the breeding season's all done, the puffin molts its colorful feathers during the winter and goes back to the ocean. One of the most surprising things I found in my research of the Atlantic puffin is that it has a great cultural significance for several different places. You can see this by several islands being called the Puffin Islands in the world based off of this particular bird. It is also the Providence bird of Newfoundland and Labrador in Canada. But what I found was really interesting was that it also is a huge site of tourism in Iceland and many other European countries. And if you go to certain stores in Iceland, you'll see a lot of puffin mascots on their store or restaurant. It also has a lot of historical references. In Icelandic folklore, puffins were thought to be great indicators of storms, and uh, they would look at them to see whether storm was coming. And then in Inuit culture, they would collect puffin beaks and use them as an instrument, and that was said to have magical healing properties. The Irish thought of them as a sacred bird and would not eat it. And then my favorite bit of folklore that I found was this Cornish folklore that believed that King Arthur reincarnated himself as a puffin and visited all of his favorite places, and I thought that was pretty cool. So, why puffins are important? Currently, puffins have continued to decline in population. They're marked as a vulnerable species right now, due to many of them not coming back to important breeding areas. And almost all of this has to do with human activity. One thing that is causing this is overfishing in certain areas where puffins get their fish from, and of course, that's a vital food source for them. Another issue is overhunting. Several countries have made it illegal to ban or made it illegal to hunt for puffins, but not everywhere. So there are some countries that are overhunting them and are eating puffins at a alarming level, more than they can sustain the population. And then also pollution is important for the decline in puffins. Oil spills notoriously have been known to ruin the waterproofing elements of feathers, which is obviously highly detrimental for a species that rely so heavily on the water and diving. And then also pollution that comes from farms into the ocean has been made known to make puffins very sick. And I mentioned the puffins because they are a very important bird. Right now, they're being studied extensively to better understand migratory patterns that I mentioned earlier, and there's a lot of research going on with that. And they also have a lot of cultural relevance. When I did my research for this project, I found this cute video of this town in Iceland that's right by a cliff where these birds breed. And they talked about how they get a lot of tourism there and they have cute little shops with puffins all over them, but the puffins just aren't returning in large numbers to the town anymore because their population is decreasing so much, and they're not just important culturally at this town, but so many other places, including Canada and stuff like that. And even on a larger scale than that, I would say puffins are important for their ecosystem. They're a predator bird species. They eat smaller fish and stuff like that. And being a higher trophic level, um, what's concerning is if you see more of a decline in this species, are we going to see a trophic cascade? Like, what environmental impacts will this bird's disappearance cause if it continues to go from vulnerable to endangered to then extinct? And I think the key point here is that we're currently having not enough discussions about our impact on the environment. And not only is this important bird species becoming less in population, but so many other species are that are very important to their ecosystem and environments, and we don't know the ramifications of all of this. So I think it's important better to make better policy decisions and to be more watchful of what we do to the environment to help populations of important bird species and other animals. And that is all I have today in my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. And then here's my works cited.